I've always believed that some of the deepest cuts don't come from strangers, they come from the people who share our last name. Maybe that's why Claire's story hit me so hard the first time I heard it. It reminded me of moments in my own life when someone I loved used a single sentence to tear a piece of me apart. But nothing, honestly nothing, comes close to what happened to her during her wedding toast. Claire had always been the quiet one in her family. Not shy, just soft in the way that made louder people mistake kindness for weakness. She wasn't the type who entered a room to be noticed. She entered hoping not to disturb anything. And for as long as she could remember, her older brother Lucas treated that softness like a flaw. As if her gentleness made her an inconvenience. As if she somehow arrived in the world taking up space that wasn't meant for her. People who met them for the first time never understood why they didn't get along. Lucas was charming, talkative, confident. One of those guys who walks into a room and immediately becomes everyone's favorite conversational partner. But charm is a tricky thing. Sometimes it's just a well-decorated box hiding something rotten underneath. Growing up, Lucas always made sure Claire knew her place below him. He had a way of teasing that wasn't playful. A way of joking that always landed like a stone in her stomach. He'd say things like, "Claire wasn't supposed to happen," or "Mom and Dad were done having kids, but, well, accidents happen." Their parents always brushed it off, telling Claire he didn't mean anything by it. But the thing about a sentence said over and over again is that eventually it becomes a truth you quietly start to accept. When Claire met Marcus years later, she'd already internalized a lot of that. She didn't think much of herself. She apologized too quickly, second-guessed her decisions, and avoided conflict like it carried electric shock. But Marcus saw something in her she couldn't yet see in herself. And if I'm being honest, I admire people like him. People who recognize value in someone when years of mistreatment have buried it under layers of self-doubt. The first time Marcus met her family, he instantly noticed the tension. He wasn't confrontational, but he was observant, the kind of person who sees more than he says. And when Lucas shook Claire off during a conversation, rolled his eyes at her, or made some unnecessary comment about how she was sensitive, Marcus clocked it. He wasn't the type to let things slide forever. But he was patient. Strategic. He wanted to understand the dynamic before stepping into it. During the months leading up to the wedding, the situation escalated. Lucas saw Marcus as a threat, not because Marcus was unkind or disrespectful, but because he gave Claire something Lucas could never take away: confidence. And when someone like Lucas senses he's losing control, the worst version of him comes out. A week before the wedding, the tension snapped. Claire, Marcus, and her family were gathered at her parents' house for final ceremony arrangements. Lucas had been unusually snarky all evening, taking every opportunity to poke fun at Claire's decisions, what flowers she picked, what decor she preferred, even the wedding menu. Nothing was safe. At one point, when Claire asked about the seating arrangements, Lucas smirked and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Honestly, it doesn't matter where Claire sits. She was never the main character in this family anyway." Her mother immediately said, "Lucas," in that half-hearted reprimand that's more for show than anything else. Her father didn't say a word. He just looked away like that was easier than confronting something uncomfortable. It was Marcus who stepped forward and placed a hand on Claire's back, but even then he held himself back. He told her later in private that he didn't want to ruin her wedding week by starting a fight with her brother. He also said something else, something that stayed with her. "I'm not letting this continue much longer. I just need the right moment." And that moment came sooner than anyone expected. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Even people who didn't like weddings admitted it. The decorations were warm and elegant, the atmosphere soft and dreamy. Claire looked breathtaking. Not because of her dress or makeup, but because she finally looked like someone who believed she deserved happiness. And Marcus, well, he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. But the real story, the one none of the guests would ever forget, unfolded during the reception. The lights dimmed, the music faded, and the clinking of glasses quieted as everyone settled into their seats for the traditional toasts. Claire had always dreaded this part. She trusted Marcus's friends. She trusted her maid of honor. But Lucas? Lucas had insisted on giving a speech. "I'm the brother. It's expected," he said. And no matter how much Claire hated the idea, she couldn't find the courage to stop him. As the MC called Lucas's name, A knot formed in her stomach. Marcus noticed immediately. He leaned closer and whispered, "Whatever happens, I'm right here." That simple sentence steadied her heartbeat just enough to keep breathing. Lucas stood up with a glass in his hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. People thought it was his usual playful grin. Claire knew better. He started harmlessly enough. A few prepared lines about growing up with a little sister who always followed him around. A memory about how she once tried to copy everything he did as a kid. Guests laughed lightly. Claire forced a polite smile. But then his tone shifted. "And well," he continued, lifting his glass slightly, "even though Claire wasn't exactly part of the plan." Marcus straightened in his seat. "Our family learned to live with her. You know, sometimes life gives you surprises, and sometimes it gives you mistakes you just have to accept." The room froze. The laughter died instantly. The air felt heavier, dense with shock, disbelief, and the kind of silence that feels like it might shatter. Claire's face went pale. Her eyes dropped to her lap. A familiar shame washed over her, the kind she thought she'd buried years ago. It was as if every insult Lucas ever threw at her had been dragged back to the surface in front of the people she loved the most. I've witnessed uncomfortable family moments before, but hearing Claire describe this one, I could almost feel how her chest tightened, how her throat closed. Moments like that leave scars even when the event ends. Lucas kept talking, oblivious or maybe fully aware of the destruction he was causing. "Anyway," he said, chuckling, "cheers to my little sister, the unexpected addition who somehow found someone patient enough to handle her." The audacity, the cruelty. It wasn't even subtle. It was a calculated strike, designed to humiliate her publicly and reestablish his power. But what Lucas didn't know, what he failed to understand, was that Marcus had reached his limit long before that moment. Marcus pushed his chair back slowly, deliberately. The sound of the legs scraping the floor echoed through the silent room like a warning. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and took Claire's hand gently, his eyes fixed on Lucas with a calmness that made the tension even sharper. For the first time, Lucas seemed unsure. Claire whispered, "Marcus, please don't," her voice trembling from years of conditioning. But Marcus didn't sit back down. He lifted his glass with steady hands. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. And right here, this exact moment is where the entire room shifted. Where everything Lucas had built on bullying and dominance began to crumble. Where Marcus decided that love isn't just something you say, it's something you defend. And that's where the first part of this story ends. Because the next words Marcus spoke didn't just silence the room. They changed the entire course of Claire's relationship with her family. Marcus held his glass in the air. His posture composed but his expression razor sharp. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet intensity radiating off him was louder than any shout. "I'd like to add something to that," he said calmly, but the tone was enough to make Lucas shift uncomfortably. "Because if we're doing honest speeches tonight, then let's at least make sure they're true." People leaned in. A few guests who had been politely smiling during Lucas's toast now looked uneasy, as if realizing they had unknowingly participated in something cruel. Marcus continued, still holding Claire's trembling hand. "You said she was a mistake," he said, his gaze locked onto Lucas. "But let me tell you what kind of mistake she is." Claire felt her heartbeat in her throat. She wasn't sure whether to pull him down or cling to him tighter. Marcus turned toward the crowd, his voice steady. "Claire is the kind of person who apologizes even when someone else steps on her foot. She's the kind of woman who remembers your favorite coffee order even if you mentioned it once. She's gentle, thoughtful, and stronger than most people will ever realize. And if that's a mistake, then I wish the world had more of them." The room remained silent, but it was a different silence now. Heavy with discomfort, sympathy, and a dawning realization that Lucas had crossed a line most people never even approach. Marcus wasn't finished. "Lucas," he said, turning back to him, "you've spent years tearing her down. Years. And everyone here knows it. Maybe they pretended not to, maybe they laughed it off, maybe they ignored it because it wasn't happening to them. But they knew." A few family members lowered their eyes. Claire's father, her aunt, even her mother, who had always brushed things aside. Marcus's voice softened, but the tremor beneath it revealed the anger he was containing. "You want to humiliate her on her own wedding day? In front of the people she tried so hard to love? Fine. But then you'll hear the truth too. Claire kept her eyes on Marcus. She never imagined anyone would speak for her this way. Especially not in front of her entire family. She's not the mistake here, Marcus said. The real mistake is believing you could treat her like this forever, and no one would ever stand up to you. Lucas stiffened, jaw tight, cheeks flushed with something between embarrassment and rage. He opened his mouth, but Marcus raised a finger, not aggressively, simply as a signal for silence. No, Marcus said. You've spoken enough. Gasps flickered around the room. People weren't used to seeing Lucas silenced. Marcus looked at Claire again. In his eyes she saw something new, anger, yes, but also pride. You don't deserve this, he whispered to her, though loud enough for everyone to hear. Not tonight, not ever. It was only when the truth settled into the room like a cold breeze that Marcus made the declaration that shifted the ground beneath everyone present. I'm not staying here to celebrate with people who think humiliating Claire is entertainment, he said. If she's out, I'm out. And trust me, she's not the one who needs to rethink her place in this family. A shocked murmur swept through the guests. Claire's mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Marcus, you can't mean that. Oh, I mean every word, he replied, his tone chillingly calm. I didn't marry into a circus, Linda. I married Claire. And I'm choosing her, every time. He gently nudged Claire's hand. Come with me if you want. We don't owe anyone here anything. The room fell into complete stillness. Even the music that had been playing softly in the background had stopped. Someone must have turned it off in the chaos. Claire froze. Every instinct she had developed over a lifetime told her not to cause conflict, not to walk away, not to be the reason something went wrong. But Marcus was giving her a choice no one had ever given her before. A choice centered entirely around her well-being. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, trembling, breathing unevenly. The weight of years and years of emotional bruises pressed down on her. She felt like a child again, small and ashamed. That's when something even more unexpected happened. Claire's father stood up. This man, quiet, passive, conflict-avoiding, rose from his seat with a look Claire had never seen in him before. Something between guilt and resolve. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Marcus is right, he said, his voice shaking slightly. We allowed this. We let Lucas talk to her that way for too many years. And Claire, I'm sorry. I should have stopped it a long time ago. Lucas's head snapped toward him. Dad? Seriously? You're taking her side now. His father didn't even look at him. I should have taken her side years ago. Claire felt tears burn behind her eyes. Not from sadness, but from a shock she didn't know how to handle. She had waited her whole life to hear her father acknowledge what she went through. Her mother sat frozen, her face conflicted but her lips tightly pressed together, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. Lucas lost control. This is ridiculous, he snapped. It was a joke. People are too sensitive these days. No, Marcus interrupted. This isn't sensitivity. This is cruelty. And you know it. Guests exchanged looks. Some nodded subtly, realizing the facade had finally cracked. Lucas scoffed. Whatever. If Claire can't take a joke, that's her problem. Marcus leaned in slightly. You didn't tell a joke. You declared to a room full of people that she was a mistake. A figure of speech, Lucas snapped, but his voice wavered. Then allow me, Marcus said, to give you a figure of speech you'll understand. He lowered his glass slowly and set it on the edge of the table. The real mistake tonight, he said, was thinking there would never be consequences. Lucas's jaw tightened. He looked like someone who had been untouchable his entire life and was experiencing vulnerability for the first time. It didn't fit him. He didn't know how to wear it. Claire finally found her voice. It came out quiet at first, fragile but steadying with every word she spoke. You weren't joking, she said. You've said things like that to me since we were kids. And every time I tried to talk about it, everyone told me I was overreacting. Everyone except Marcus. Her hands were trembling, but she kept going. You made me believe I didn't belong. You made me believe I was the problem. And tonight you said it again. In front of everyone. On purpose. Lucas rolled his eyes, but Claire continued anyway. I'm tired, she said. I'm so tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. Her mother opened her mouth to speak, but Claire lifted a hand, not dramatically, just in a quiet plea. Please don't tell me he didn't mean it, she said. Please don't make excuses for him this time. Her mother sank back into her seat, tears gathering in her eyes. It was the first time Claire had ever seen her mother look truly remorseful. Then Claire turned to Marcus and whispered, "Thank you." He squeezed her hand. "I'll always stand up for you." The crowd watched, drawn into the rawness of the moment. This wasn't drama. This was decades of emotional damage rising to the surface. Marcus looked at Claire and said, "This doesn't have to be our night anymore. We can leave and start the rest of it somewhere peaceful." Claire nodded slowly. "I want to leave." Before they took a step, her father spoke again. "Wait." Claire turned to him cautiously. He walked toward her, his eyes red. "I want to explain something. Not to excuse anything. Just to explain." Her father took a deep breath and spoke in a voice that felt like it carried 20 years of unspoken truth. "You were not planned," he admitted. "That part is true. When your mother found out she was pregnant, things were already strained between us." Lucas heard more conversations than he should have. Arguments, fears, frustrations. He took those words and misunderstood them, then weaponized them. Claire's chest felt tight, but she didn't interrupt. "We were scared," he continued. "Financially, emotionally, we were in a bad place. But you were never a mistake. You were never unwanted. You were a surprise, yes, but a blessing. And we failed you by not correcting the narrative Lucas created." Lucas scoffed again, but no one paid attention to him this time. Tears filled Claire's eyes. She wasn't crying because she needed her father's validation. She was crying because she had waited her whole life to understand why Lucas hated her so intensely. Her father stepped back and wiped his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Claire held Marcus's arm a little tighter. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. She didn't forgive everything. Not instantly. But hearing the truth unlocked a piece of her that had been hurting silently for decades. Lucas muttered, "This is unbelievable," but no one responded. Claire and Marcus moved toward the exit. People parted like a quiet wave. As they reached the door, someone clapped. Softly. One person, then another, until a small group was applauding. Not loudly, not mockingly, but respectfully. Supporting her decision to walk away from toxicity. Claire didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Marcus guided her outside. Into the cool night air where the music and chatter became muffled echoes behind them. She exhaled deeply, her breath shaking. "I feel like I can breathe again," she whispered. Marcus brushed a tear from her cheek. "That's what you deserved from the beginning." They walked under strings of outdoor lights, away from the noise, away from the past. The night felt peaceful, almost symbolic, like the beginning of a new life not defined by wounds. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Claire felt free. As for Lucas, the silence he created became his own undoing. People saw him differently that night, saw the truth beneath the charm. And Claire? She no longer had to carry the weight of his cruelty. Because sometimes the loudest justice isn't revenge. It's choosing peace. And that's where their story turns into a quiet victory, one born not of confrontation, but of self-worth finally reclaimed. In life, there's a moment when you choose who you belong to. Claire chose Marcus. But more importantly, she chose herself. And that choice changed everything. In the weeks that followed, Claire still wrestled with old memories, but Marcus reminded her every day that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about realizing she deserved more than what she had accepted for years. And she believed him slowly at first, then fully. She no longer allowed her identity to be shaped by someone else's insecurity. Even the harshest words from her past began to lose their power. People around her admired the transformation. Some even apologized privately for not noticing sooner. Others kept their distance, unsure how to approach her after the truth came out. But Claire didn't carry resentment. She simply carried herself differently. Standing a little taller, breathing a little deeper, and existing without the constant fear of being diminished. Lucas avoided her. He avoided the entire situation. It was easier to pretend nothing had happened. Without the audience validating him, his influence dissolved. His loudness no longer controlled the room. Claire and Marcus moved forward, building a life rooted in tenderness and respect, something she had once believed wasn't meant for her. And though the memory of that night stayed with her, it no longer hurt. It reminded her instead of the night she finally reclaimed her voice. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with forgiveness or understanding. Sometimes it begins with someone standing up and saying, "Enough." Marcus did that. And because of it, Claire found a strength inside herself she never knew existed. And I guess that's why her story stayed with me for so long. It made me think about the power of a single moment, a single sentence, a single act of courage that can rewrite years of pain. We don't choose the families we're born into, but we can choose the ones we build, the ones we protect, and the ones we walk away from. In the end, Claire didn't lose a brother. She simply lost the illusion that she ever owed him silence. And to me, that's not a loss, it's liberation. I think about Claire sometimes when I'm reflecting on the people who shaped me, for better or worse. Every family has its secrets, its wounds, its breaking points. But stories like hers remind me that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I'm done being hurt," and walks out the door. And maybe that's why I wanted to share this with you. Because somewhere, someone else needs permission to choose peace too. And if Claire's story teaches anything, it's that love isn't proven in perfect moments. It's proven in the moments when someone stands up and says, "You matter, and I've got you."